In this video, we're going to go over the classroom observation process for classroom teachers. This observation protocol uses the Danielson framework, and it's part of the Educator effectiveness system. It's meant to give feedback and promote your professional growth within your teaching practice. There are 5 steps to this process. Step 1 is setting up your observation cycle. Your principal or vice principal will schedule the planning conference that should take 20 to 30 minutes, formal observation that should take 15 to 30 minutes, and a reflection conference that should take between 20 and 30 minutes. Before your planning conference, make sure you log into PDE3 to preview the planning conference questions ahead of time. You'll also want to answer any questions that are relevant to you, and you can attach documents such as lesson plans or worksheets that are relevant to the observation. Step 2 is the planning conference. It's also called a pre-observation. During the planning conference, you and your observer should do the following. Make sure to review the components of Hawaii's classroom observation rubric with your principal or vice principal. Ask any questions as they relate to your planned lesson and to the observation rubric. If you did the interview protocol for planning conference, discuss any responses to any questions from that section. Share any goals for the lesson that you have planned on your observation day with your principal or vice principal. You can also bring any other materials that you feel will help the principal or vice principal understand the lesson that you're going to be teaching that day. That can include pictures or any type of reading material. If there have been any past observations, go over the connections that you may see between those past observations and the new current observation. Share any objectives or activities for your lesson, and you may want to suggest specific types of data to your principal or vice principal that they might want to collect. For example, you may want to say, my students are going to reduce fractions to the lowest terms. I know that the boys in my class really like fractions, but you can track how many times I call on the boys compared to the girls in my class. I want to see if I'm giving each group a fair shot at answering each question. Step 3 is the observation. Carry out the lesson that you discussed in your planning conference with your principal or vice principal. Note that when your principal or vice principal is in the room, they may be actually collecting data on you while they're sitting there. So they may have their laptop out typing, or they may be scribbling on a piece of paper. Note that all the information that they're going to be collecting is already going to be covered in Hawaii's classroom observation rubric. So you can review that rubric and there shouldn't be any surprises on the type of information they're collecting. The principal or vice principal is going to try and record as much evidence as they possibly can about the 5 components that are covered in the rubric. Following the classroom visit, your principal or vice principal will notify you that they have shared their observation notes for your review in the PDE3 system. Log on to PDE3 and review his or her feedback and self-assess what occurred during the actual observation. Make sure you reflect on what you had planned for the lesson and what actually happened, and how that can be possibly observed or graded according to Hawaii's classroom observation rubric. You may want to prepare for the post-observation conference by selecting samples of student work that came out of the lesson that you taught during the observation. Step 4 is the reflecting conference. During your reflecting conference, reflect back on your practices discussed during the planning conference and those demonstrated during the observation. Based on the documentation provided by your principal or vice principal during the observation, you want to ask a couple different questions and discuss a couple different things. One of the things you want to do is summarize your recollection of the lesson. Mention things that you thought went well in the lesson, as well as things that you wish you would have done differently. Discuss any data that the principal or vice principal captured during the observation. Discuss the lesson and clarify evidence collected for each component. Reflect on the level of performance based on the evidence collected and alignment to the components in Hawaii's classroom observation rubric. After discussing the evidence, your principal or vice principal will assign a rating to each component. Step 5 is concluding the observation cycle. Log into the PDE3 system and complete the teacher observation summary based on the discussion that you had in your reflection conference. Your principal or vice principal may add comments to your summary form. This closes out the formal observation process. Thank you for participating in the observation.